Alright, so in this video I'm going to cover advanced conditional formatting. If you don't already know how to do conditional formatting, you should watch my regular conditional formatting video. This will be more in-depth and more difficult methods to do conditional formatting, more specifically using formulas to do conditional formatting. So to do conditional formatting using a formula, you have to be able to create a logical test that will give you true and falses in the correct rows. So a basic example of that would be, I could go here and say, let's check if this number is greater than 120, something like that. If I hit enter, that's going to say false because, well, it's not greater than 120. And if I drag this down, see, I'm going to get trues for numbers that are actually above that 120 number. And that would be a formula that would work for conditional formatting. So now to apply conditional formatting using this formula, what do? You copy the first formula on top. So I'm going to go here and copy this formula. Control C, Command C should do that. I'm going to hit escape without changing the formula. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the range where I want this applied. Now the important part here is to always start highlighting from the same row where you copied the formula. Because my formula was copied from the second row right here, I need to make sure that I start highlighting this range from that second row and go down. And if I do this, I'm going to go now under Format, Conditional Formatting. And here, if I look at Rules, the last option should be Custom Formula. And if I use that custom formula, I'm going to paste my formula here. And then you can choose whatever formatting you want. And now everything should be colored using that logic. So if I hit escape now, see, everything that's true is getting the color, everything that's false, it's not. And it's not really tied to this formula. You can go ahead and remove this formula afterwards, and it should still work. So that was a basic way to use a formula to apply conditional formatting. I'm going to undo this to get back to my formula. To make this a little more interesting, what you could do, you could highlight all the columns in your formula and lock them. In this case, the only column I have in my formula is age. I'm going to add a $sign to lock the formula. Now, let me explain you why I'm doing this first of all. So if I wanted to make sure that my formula is going to work for the whole row instead of just one column, what I need to make sure is when I drag this formula right and I drag it down, I get trues for the rows that are supposed to get colored like this, so which are right now, but I should also get falses for all the rows that should not get the color for right here. Now you can see how I get false in the first column, but then I get true in the other column. So this would not work. So to avoid the situation, I'm going to lock the column. So if I go back to my formula, add a $sign for the column, I'm going to hit enter. And then if I now drag this formula right and down, you will see that it'll accomplish what I was looking for. So I'm going to get falses for the whole row here and trues for all rows in here. And what this is going to give me, if I go back and copy this new formula with equal sign and everything, I'm going to hit escape, go here, select my data range, again starting from the same row where I copied the formula. I'm going to go under Format, Conditional Formatting, and then I will delete this rule and add another one. So I'm going to scroll here and use custom formula is, and then paste my formula. And that should basically color code the entire row based on this formula logic. And what I can do now, I can just remove all of this true and false formulas here. And now I have conditional formatting based on the formula, and that looks at this cell, and if it's greater than whatever number I was looking for, it's going to color the whole row. So that's the way you can apply formatting for the entire row if you wanted to do that using a formula. So now we can take this to another level. I'm going to undo this couple of steps here before I applied this by making this a little more dynamic. So I can go here on top, for example, and type a number, let's say 150. And now instead of hard coding in my formula, this 120 number, I can simply go to my formula and refer to that cell on top. That cell on top, right here, 150. Now I should be comparing to the same 150 across this whole range of formulas. So I'm going to lock the cell by pressing F4 key. So now if I drag this formula right and down, that should just give me truths for any numbers that are above 150. Now, if I go here and change this 150 to something else, I'm going to try something like 200. See, I hit enter. These logics change. So now we get truths for anything that's above 200. See that row? That works. I'm going to switch this back to 150 and get back to this. Now I'm going to use this formula for conditional formatting. So I'm going to copy this formula, hit escape, go back here and highlight the range. Go ahead and do format, conditional formatting, pretty much the whole thing again. Custom formula is, paste the formula, and hit done. Close out of this. So that should just highlight anything above 150. I'm going to go ahead and delete these true and falses. So the interesting part of this is that now if I go change this number from 150 to 200, see, my conditional formatting will change based on whatever number is in here in this cell. And so now I can tie my formatting to a cell value. So now you can calculate that cell value. So for example, I can calculate the average for this whole column, and then that should highlight anything that's above average because we said greater than that number. Taking this to the next level, I'm going to remove that. So what if I want to do the same thing, but I don't want to use the value on this worksheet. I want to use the value on this other tab. I'm going to call this input. So now I want to be able to just go here and type my number 150 and use that number in this calculation. So let's see how that works out. So I go here and say equals. I'm going to check if this is greater than. I'm going to go to my input tab, click on this, and do F4 key to lock the cell. So I hit enter, that gets me back to this. I'm gonna go back to my formula, lock all the columns as usual, add the $sign, right? And try to see if this works. And you should see how everything above that number 150, I believe that's what I had entered, there it is, should be saying true. So that's great, right? So now let's try to use this formula. I'm going to go back to this, copy this entire formula, go back here, select my data range, go under format, conditional formatting, try to use a formula and paste my formula right there, right? And see, I'm getting an error because conditional formatting doesn't allow you to use input from other tabs. So if you have formulas that refer to other tabs like this, you cannot use them for conditional formatting. So to get around this problem, you have to use function INDIRECT. And if you're not familiar with INDIRECT function, it needs its own video, and I do have a video covering this, so you should definitely watch that to understand how INDIRECT function works. But in here, just to quickly fix this problem, so because that A1 cell refers to input tab, I'm gonna convert that entire thing to text like this by putting it in quotes, and then put this entire thing inside of a function INDIRECT. There it is. And INDIRECT will make it work as a range, which should right now produce the same result, which it does, as you can see. So now I'm going to go back and copy this formula, hit escape, go back and select my data range, go back to my format, conditional formatting, and use a formula, and finally paste that formula. And now because we're using INDIRECT function, we can get around that problem of not being able to refer to other tabs, which now I can. And as you can see, it works. So now I can go ahead and delete this. This works. Now let's go back and change our number. Let's change it to, let's say 100. I go back, see everything above 100 now is colored. I want to show you a couple of other things. Let's say we're trying to highlight all the states that are listed on a different tab. First, let me actually get rid of the current conditional formatting that's in here. Here we go. So I'll just copy a few states here. Move here, paste those states. I'm going to delete one of these in the middle so they are not exactly in the same order. So basically the states that are here, I want them highlighted in here. Or maybe we'll highlight the whole row. That's fine too. So first I have to make the formula. So I'm going to do this by using a combination of functions isNumber and match. So I'm going to start with match. So I'm going to try to match this state that's on the left, comma, go to input tab and select the range. I'm going to select the whole column C to make this easy for me. I'm going to go ahead and do function F4 to lock the range, comma, and the last argument in match function is the match type, which is 0 for exact match. I'm going to close parentheses, hit enter. And what I'm getting is NA. I'm going to drag this down a little bit to see what we get. So let's switch this to number formatting or something like this. So now if you look here for New York, we get NA because New York is not in this list. If I go and look at the next one, MA, if I look in here, that's actually in this list. And that's number 3 in the list right there. That's why we're getting the 3. Then we get for this one, 1, because that should be number 1 in the list. So basically match is giving us the position of the element it was able to find. So it's looking at these different states, and if it finds the state, it says it was in this position. Now, to make sure this works for conditional formatting, we have to make sure it gives us true and false. We don't want these numbers and NAs. So to get that to work like that, we're gonna just wrap this in a function called isNumber, which will give us true for anything that's a number, which means when it's found. And if I take this formula and drag it down, basically, I'm going to get true anytime that state is in the other list and false every time it's not. And because we have false and true sort of situation, we should be able to use this for conditional formatting. Now, to make sure that this does work for conditional formatting, we're going to have to do a couple of things. Number 1, we have to lock all the columns. So I'm going to lock the column F. And number 2, anything that refers to another tab, in this case, this part, needs to go inside of INDIRECT function. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in quotes and then wrap it inside of INDIRECT function. Go ahead and close this from this other end, and that should be INDIRECT function. Now I should be getting the same results after this change, which I am, but now this should work for conditional formatting. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, hit escape. Go back and select the range I want highlighted. I'm going to do the whole data set like this, all the columns. Go here, format, conditional formatting. I'm going to find the last option, which is custom formula, and paste my formula and hit done. Close this and clear this column. So now anything that's listed on the other tab here, these 3 states, should be selected in this green color, which they are. So I'm going to go back and add California to see what happens. So I'm going to go back here and add California to this list. And now we should see all Californias are highlighted as well. So now basically anything that appears on this column in this other tab is going to be colored in here for the whole row. That's great. You could also reverse this. So maybe you wanted the opposite. Anything that's not listed here should be colored, right? So we can do that simply by reversing the logic of our true and false using not functions. So I'll just go back and go to my conditional formatting to change it really quickly. I'm going to click on this. This used to give us trues and falses. Now to reverse which ones are getting colored and which ones are not, I'm just going to simply wrap this entire thing in a function not, which will convert falses to trues and trues to falses. So I'll go back and close this from this other end, hit done. So now what I'm going to get is that anything that's not on the other tab is colored. So see, New York is not here, so that's colored. But if I go back and add New York to the list, see, it's not colored. If you want to really get better at this, you want to watch logical tests and watch my videos about if functions, logical test, if, and, or, not, all those functions. I've covered them in separate videos. So the more you learn about how to create logical tests and get trues and falses, the more you'll be able to accomplish using these and conditional formatting. Now, a couple of other things I'm going to go over really quickly here. I'm going to clear this first of all. So let's say we want to highlight any name here that's a duplicate. So I'll just cut this data down a little bit. So Command Shift down, delete all the rows. So that's pretty much all we have. So I want to just highlight names that are duplicates here. So let's see first of all if we have any, and if we don't, let me just make that happen. So those are duplicates, so I want to make sure I highlight duplicates. So to highlight duplicates, we basically have to create a formula that's going to give us true for anything that's a duplicate. So one way to do this is to use COUNTIFs function. And if I do COUNTIFs and highlight this range, I'm going to select that, F4 to lock it, comma, and as a criteria, I will select the item in the same row right here, close parentheses, and then I'm going to lock the column C right there. Do this, drag this down, so this just gives us the count. So anything that has a duplicate should give us a higher count than 1. So see, we have 3 duplicates for this one, 3 duplicates for this one, 3 duplicates for this one, apparently. Now let's see, what about this? So apparently it's just 1. I thought I made a copy of it, but apparently I overwrote it later on. Let me just make another thing here. See, now we have 2 of that. So now I should be able to just use this for conditional formatting, right? So if I copy this, I can select these, or you can select the entire data if you did the column lockings the way I did it here. So just to show you, if I highlight just the names, I'm going to go here, conditional formatting, go do a custom formula and paste my formula right here. Done. Then that didn't work because I forgot to convert this to trues and falses, didn't I? So I'm going to undo that because this needs to say true and false. So what we can do now, we can say, is that greater than 1? And if it is, it's going to give us true. So for everything that's 2, 3, 4, whatever, other than ones, it's going to give us true and false. Now I should be able to use this. So I'm going to copy this, hit escape, go back to this, select the names, format, conditional formatting, use a formula, and paste the formula. And there we have it. Now everything that's a duplicate is highlighted in that color. Now I could do this for the whole row if I wanted to. I just have to select the data set like this, conditional formatting, and I'm going to add another rule, and custom formula is paste the formula, and we should see how it's all highlighted in that color. I'm going to delete this old rule. There we have it. So all the duplicates are selected. Again, we don't need to keep this, delete that formula from here, and this is still going to work. So for example, if we create another duplicate for this one, see, it's now highlighted. Undo that. Now the next thing finally I want to show you is how to highlight only the extra duplicates instead of highlighting duplicates in general. So right now, because there are multiple Julio occurrences, we're highlighting all of them. But what I want to do, I want to not highlight the first one. I just want to highlight the second and third duplicates in this list. And to get that done, I'm going to first undo a few steps here to get to my formula without conditional formatting and create a different formula. So the formula I'm going to use to make this happen, I'm going to again use COUNTIFs, but I'm going to use it in a different way. So the criteria range I'm going to use for this COUNTIFs formula is going to be that cell that's on the left. So it's going to be a range of the same cell. So from C2 colon C2, that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to use that range, comma, and in that range, I'm going to give the criteria of the same cells. So that's going to be my formula. So I'm using the criteria of the same cell range, and I'm checking the results as a condition as the same cell. Now, to make this work for dragging down, I need to do some locking. I need to first of all make sure I lock this beginning part of this range, which is C2, this top part. I'm not locking the rest of this. But because this is conditional formatting, I'm going to lock all the columns. So I'm going to go back here and add a column $sign here and a $sign here. For all the column C's, I'm going to leave these two rows unlocked. So now what's going to happen if I drag this down, you will see that only starting from the second occurrence, we're going to get something that gives us more than 1. So 2, 3, 2, etc. So now again, if I go back here and check, is this greater than 1? Well, it's going to give us false until we get an extra duplicate, which is going to give us true. So now again, I'm going to take this, copy that formula, hit escape, go back and select my data range, go under format, conditional formatting, the same thing as usual, as you may have guessed. Go back here, maybe change the color a little bit. And now we should be just highlighting the extra duplicates. See the first occurrence of Julio, it's not highlighted. Starting from the second occurrence, it's highlighted here. The same for Jerry. So we have Jerry someplace here. There it is. And then we have another Jerry. The second one is selected. And basically what I'm getting to is that if you're able to somehow build a formula that gives you true and false in the right places, you could just use it for conditional formatting. And the only extra trick you need to know, if you're referring to other tabs in your spreadsheet, make sure you use indirect function or it's just not gonna work. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.